but you just mentioned Orange Cassidy a minute ago, and that was somebody I also wanted to talk about. You had a couple of great matches with Orange Cassidy, and I've seen more than a few people saying that you kind of brought something new out of Cassidy. Talk about that a little bit. What was it like facing him, and was that different from your typical style of match, working with a guy like him and his sort of style?
No, super easy. I love wrestling Orange Cassidy. I kind of had it in my head that I wanted to, for a while. And a lot of times I'll see things or have ideas or have visions, and I'll just kind of keep it tucked away in my brain for when the time is right. And, that's a situation kind of, that I, had with Orange Cassidy. And, that's another example of whenever they gave him that belt, it was called whatever the fuck it was called. And it was just another one of a million belts with a geographical title. It was the fucking Northwestern Nebraska championship or whatever. And what does that even mean? You know what I mean? Because none of the, we're not, because you're defending him in all these different cities and different, I don't know why they're geographically named sometimes. They're anyway, they gave it to him and he, took it upon himself. That was all him, choosing to, I'll wrestle people who normally wouldn't maybe get a shot on TV, and I'll have a bunch of badass matches and do it every single week and do this, super, kind of, workhorse take on every challenger, underdog, babyface, 92 Bret Hart kind of thing that he did, and, having different, not just, beating everybody with the same, finish every night, coming up with creative ways to win and escape these scenarios, and always, coming up with different finishes and being super creative, and, that was all him. So, he turned that international championship into a thing just on his, he made it into something. And then I think I took it to the next level, because then I was like, oh, well, now it's not just you needed somebody to go after it that wasn't just a guy you normally don't see, I don't want to say anything I don't want to insult anybody, so I'm trying to...
Well, no, yeah, but I get it. I think everybody would get what you're saying.
At a certain point, you had to, somebody at a different level has to go after it. So when I put my sights on it, now all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, now it's main event at pay-per-view. And, I gave it that extra step, but, Orange put all the work in to get it there. And, the important thing for me with that was a lot of times, you don't have control over where your storylines go. So you build and build and build, something, and you want it to have the perfect ending. And then for whatever reason, it doesn't, and it's out of your control, and you're like, oh, fuck. So, and I've been in that situation before where I'm it just, didn't really it just could have been so much of a better ending to that particular movie or book or story. And he put in so much work with that international championship that I'm like, all right, I want to make sure that this particular chapter of this particular book and this story ends perfectly and as it should. And as it turned out, we ended up in the main event of pay-per-view. And I don't think that Orange Cassidy takes on the world in an impossible task that he knew he would ultimately fail, and he knew his body would eventually break down. And, we all knew how this was going to end. It was just kind of let's see how long we can make this go, and let's see how long we can push the boundaries, and let's test the endurance of a man and, his body and his soul and his spirit, and see how far he can go. So to me, that had to have the perfect ending, and I think it did. I hope he would feel that way. But a lot of, Orange Cassidy is a guy that I think it's one of those you know, he's just like always like the first example of a guy that I use of like, you know, people talk about like, you know, a lot of maybe people, you know, with a lot of experience, you know, but from maybe a different generation who maybe don't have the mindset that, you know, things evolve and change and maybe aren't as open-minded as they could be. And Orange Cassidy is like the first guy they look at and go like, oh, that's stupid, that doesn't work. And especially when I first got out of WWE, when I was kind of looking at I hadn't even left yet. I was kind of like looking at the world because I felt like I'd kind of been I kind of felt like Rip Van Winkle a little bit. Like I just kind of was like, all right, what's going out there on the fucking scene? Like, cause, you know, you get in there, there's only like one way to do that. I don't want to turn it into a talking shit about WWE thing because it's not what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to make a point of like where I was at mentally. It was like, all right, I want to learn and see like where we're at. Cause like the landscape was like different and there was all this different new shit, right? And I'm like, okay, well, and there's all these crowds and all these, indie wrestling was like hot and there's all these new promotions and new wrestlers. I'm like, all right, like, let me take a look at it. Cause obviously something's happening here. And, Orange Cassidy, for example, you know, you look at that and most of the, you know, the old guard of the world just go, that's stupid. That's not going to work. That's, you know, this is like indie garbage crap or whatever. And then you go like, well, look, the crowd's going nuts for it. You know, I remember the first time I saw him, he's doing like, it was like sloth go slow motion thing, and the crowd's going bananas for it. And most people will be like, and even if you're tolerant of him, you'd be like, oh yeah, but that works in front of like that crowd in the little 500 seat, but it's not going to work in like the major leagues, you know. And well, let's see. And then it does. And like no matter how much people try to keep saying like that's not going to work or this is not going to work, it keeps working. And it keeps working on a larger and larger scale. But the important thing to me about, and this is the key about Orange Cassidy that I'm impressed by, is that he'd gotten over enough to where like, there'll always be room for like a recurring comedy character who's beloved, who's like just, you know, popped in here and there. And, that's a good, there's job security in that. And that's a good spot to be in. Cause, you know, you'll kind of always have that job, you know, but that's your job. You're stuck there, you know. He'd gotten over enough that even the people who would criticize him had become tolerant of him. Like, well, you know, like, yeah, he's, you know, we need guys like that on the show to come in and for a laugh here and there. He did the opposite. He continued to evolve. And that was the interesting thing to me. Is like, all right, well, what, you know, he had the guts to try to push forward and show that he could be a main eventer and show that he could have real, serious, gripping encounters and real, serious, gritty fights. And he showed that he could bring something different out of himself while not betraying the character. And, you know, cause that's where a lot of people would screw up too, is they would just like drop everything that got him over in the first place and go like, oh, okay, well now I'm going to be serious. Well, it's like, well, now you're not the guy I fell in love with. Whereas like, I feel like, that's the thing that I definitely wanted to do with him was like not betray the character, but evolve it and continue it to grow. And like, who knows where Orange Cassidy goes over the next 10 years. I think he's just like, just now growing into his prime, and we'll see what it could be. So, you know, I would be happy to have been a part of that kind of evolution. So, you know, very, very impressed with Orange Cassidy.
Awesome. Yeah, he's definitely had an amazing arc in AEW to see him going from what you said, like the sloth character, to having what a lot of people would consider like banger matches on a weekly basis now. It's great.
Yeah, and like he's one of those guys that's like, there's a few guys like that are kind of AEW homegrown, for lack of a better term, guys. Orange Cassidy is one of the guys that, you know, is like one of these homegrown AEW guys that kind of first came to national prominence here. And, you know, Orange Cassidy, Hangman Page, I think, is another one. Darby, that they have there's a certain kind of connection with our audience at AEW, where I think they definitely see them as like their guys. And, you know, I think we need to really, I think there's something very important there. And these guys, I think we need to really treat these guys like gold, because there's something very valuable in that, you know, these guys are these fans' guys. And they'll follow them to the ends of the earth, you know? So, I don't think that's a thing to take for granted at all.